If you live outside of Europe or Australia, you might think this is a monster that wants to eat your soul, but it's actually just a video cable. We here in Europe got the short end of the stick a lot of the time in gaming's early years, with a ton of 50Hz content and many games skipping Europe entirely. But we've always had the capability of getting incredible picture quality out of our consoles, thanks to this toothy boy. This is a Scart cable. You'll often hear it referred to as RGB Scart, and they pretty much mean the exact same thing. Basically, RGB means they're fully wired. There are a few of these that are wired in a cheap way and don't have all of their fangs, so you've got to double check that what you're buying is an RGB Scart cable before you go full in, but most of the time, they most likely are. So, what the heck is RGB? Let's do a quick little comparison with my little boy, the Sega Saturn. We'll first test composite video, which are these red, white, and yellow cables that came with most consoles. Then we'll try S-Video, which I'm sure many of you in the States thought was the best cable at the time. And then finally, Scart. So here is composite, which is not great, and I'm sure most of us just used it because it came with our consoles. Composite's very mucky, very murky. I just wouldn't use it unless you have no other choice. S-Video is a huge step up in clarity, but colors and finer details could still be better. And finally, we have RGB Scart. It may appear darker than composite and S-Video, but truly it's a rich array of colors, and we can zoom all the way in and retain a huge amount of detail. Look at these beautiful pixels! Look at them! Alright, that's probably enough zoom. Editing John, stop zooming! Not all Scart cables are created equal. It's tempting to go for the incredibly cheap ones on eBay, but they'll likely introduce a lot of noise and artifacting. These gel lines over here are incredibly common amongst the cheap cables. If there's any block colors, you'll see these everywhere. It's very distracting. Most consoles had official Scart cables, and they're great choices, but nowadays multiple sites specialize in creating the best cable possible. Unlike the cheap ones, these individually shield all the wires in the cable and all around use better components. It really is a huge difference. It's not like buying one of those, £50 HDMI cables. They don't make much difference at all. This absolutely does. But even a cheap Scart cable is pretty good. There's definitely drawbacks, but it's much better than composite and arguably S-Video. But still, I wouldn't cheap out. These can be incredible. Much like how composite and component are being phased out on modern TVs, as is Scart. The majority of 4K displays only have HDMI these days. I'm hanging on to this TV right here because not only is it 1080p, but there's HDMI, and component and composite, and my beautiful boy Scart. But even then, any HD TV just isn't great at processing analog video. Just like composite and S-Video, Scart truly shines on a CRT. You can try and find video converters like this cheap Scart to HDMI adapter, but not only does this introduce a huge amount of input lag, but it does not do the quality justice at all. These are kind of a last resort, I wouldn't recommend them. But something like a RetroTink 5X, OSSC, or FrameMeister are game changers. They truly show what Scart can do, and make it look great on a digital panel. I only recently got a RetroTink, but man, this changes so much. It's not only great for processing Scart and outputting at 4K, but the motion adaptive deinterlacer can make 480i appear as 480p. That's amazing for so many older games, especially for PS2, which is swimming in 480i. But okay, composite, S-Video, Scart, why not use component, right? Obviously not many older systems support component, but for PlayStation 2, surely component's better, right? Well, actually, for the most part, no. Here's the drawback first. Unlike component, Scart cannot do 480p. You can do 240p, 480i, but not 480p. However, the picture quality and color vibrancy is actually sharper and more accurate via Scart than component. And if you're using something like a RetroTink to deinterlace anyway, the gap between 480i and 480p becomes incredibly small. So while there is still the drawback of no 480p, Scart does match and in some ways exceeds a component cable. And keeping into account this works natively for much older systems like the Super Nintendo and Mega Drive. And over on the GameCube, component cables never actually released in Europe, and so the vast majority of games replace progressive scan support with a 50Hz and 60Hz toggle. So if you've got a PAL GameCube, absolutely do not spend £300 on a component cable. The games here can't do 480p anyway, so Scart is the obvious choice over component. It's cheaper, it's more widely available, and it's better. So why is Scart so good? Well, let's take a look at these cables a moment. There's RF, which I actually used as late as the Dreamcast, and I do not recommend. This is the worst possible quality you can get out of these machines. Do not use RF in the year of 2022 unless you must, or unless you're a ruffian. Then there's Composite, which I'm sure most of us are very familiar with. These would usually get bundled with the systems, and I'm sure most of us did not upgrade them. We just kind of stuck with these cables. The problem with Composite is while it does have 3 cables, these 2 are audio channels, the left one and the right one. This means this yellow one has all the video information crammed in this one little prong. Color, brightness, sync, it's all just stuffed in here, and so the image ends up looking a bit like this. Some people associate this with how games actually looked back in those days, but the majority of your consoles are capable of looking way better than Composite. I think some of us are just nostalgic for this because we never tried anything but Composite. Much like RF, I would not recommend using Composite in this day and age. It's not great. In fact, here in Europe, most of our consoles not only came with Composite, but also a Composite to Scart adapter. I guess because so many of our TVs had Scart ports and our VCRs too, and you're more likely to have a spare Scart port than you are a Composite port, so I guess it made sense. Got a lot of these things lying around. I'll never use them. S-Video was way less common in Europe. I never saw this cable as a child, as only when I started making videos that I knew that it existed. Over in the States though, it was way more popular. I guess because this is most likely the best picture quality you could have got those days. S-Video may seem similar to Composite, where all the info's just stuffed down one cable, but look a bit closer, and you'll see it's not. There's multiple prongs dividing aspects of the image, delivering way less interference and much better quality. If you're rocking your older consoles with S-Video, you've still got a pretty good setup. It could be better, but I respect it. And with Scart, they said, how many prongs do you want? And the developer of Scart, Mr. Scart himself, he said, yes. There are so many prongs! Even in the 80s, your Mega Drive was capable of looking like this. I mean, many of us in Europe didn't make it look like this because we just stuck with what was in the box, but you could have done it, that's the point. This isn't just for European consoles either. Let's go from the Mega Drive to a Genesis, and as you can see, it still looks pretty damn great. Scart is just a video cable that's been around for decades. You don't need any modding, just plug this cable in, and you'll get image quality like this. And even if you were to mod your Mega Drive with, say, an HDMI out port, the quality wouldn't be that different to what we're getting here with Scart. Many believe they can tell when a game is being emulated, but can you tell me which Earthbound is Switch Online and which Earthbound's from a real Super Nintendo? They pretty much look the exact same despite one being directly from HDMI, right? This one is Scart for what it's worth. I'm lying, it's this one. Heck, another comparison! Here's Sonic Origins, a 2022 game running at 4K through an Xbox Series X, and here is Sonic 2 running on an actual Genesis via Scart. It looks better on the console from 1988, and I'm not even exaggerating. Look at this! Origins has this bad blur filter. Why did developers do this? Tell me why. Obviously, Scart won't make games actually perform better. These are still low resolution, but they can be seen with all their clarity. And for the 8-bit, 16-bit, and low poly 3D eras, I think they look astonishing like this. PS2, GameCube, and Xbox look pretty great too, but obviously their jaggies are far more pronounced. On PS1, they're less like jaggies and more like big blocks, and I think that looks great. You do have consoles like the NES, which can't support Scart because their video is integrated into the console like this. It's either Composite, RF, or nothing. There's no universal port. For RGB on the NES, you would need to mod the system itself. But Super Nintendo and Mega Drive look absolutely stunning via Scart, and so do the PlayStation and Saturn. I much prefer how Square's RPGs on the PlayStation look on actual hardware. Like in the Final Fantasy VII or Chrono Cross remasters, the backgrounds and character models are different resolutions, and nothing matches. It's like they're floating on JPEGs. Whereas on actual systems, it blends properly. It looks fantastic. But I specify PlayStation and Saturn and not N64 because the N64 has rubbish video output. That's the kindest way of saying it. Despite Super Nintendo having great RGB support, N64 has nothing at all. You just plug it in, and it's a black image. On N64, S-Video is the best you can get, but even then, it doesn't look that different to Composite because there's a big blur filter over everything. GameCube is likewise a little bit strange. For whatever reason, S-Video doesn't work on PAL consoles, and Scart doesn't work on NTSC consoles. So PAL gets Scart, and NTSC gets S-Video, which, I mean, why? I don't know why, it's just not universal. So if you've got a European GameCube, you are fine for Scart, and technically, that's the best image quality you can get. Obviously you miss out on progressive scan, but no one has these cables anyway, and if they do, they live in this mansion from stock images. So, long story short, if you want the best possible picture quality out of your older consoles, you should be looking at good quality Scart cables. If your TV doesn't support Scart, there are incredible scalers out there like the RetroTink, but obviously that is another investment and you are not made of money. I'm aware of this. So remember, if a company tries giving you a remaster with these smushed, smoothed pixels, look at them in the eye and say, no buddy, my Mega Drive from the 80s can deliver better picture quality than this. What are you trying to pull here? This isn't what games looked like. This is not the intention. This was never the intention. This makes me very, very mad. It upsets me. Don't do this. Why does the Xbox Live Arcade version of Castlevania Symphony of the Night say that this is the enhanced graphics op? This is not enhanced. What are you enhancing? What? Who? Do you play like this, viewer? We must respect the sanctity of pixels. Do not tarnish their legacy. Each pixel is important, and via Scart you can fully appreciate them. Good day, everyone. Oh, I kind of lost my cool there at the end. Thank you for watching, everyone! I've wanted to do a video like this for a very long time, and unfortunately, I had been sick these last 2 or so weeks. But thanks to these lovely patrons, I could take some time off without ruining my income. So thanks so much, and a lot more videos coming. I've been writing a lot in my time off. Bye, everyone!